I'm joined here this morning by Ashley Moreno, who's our legal expert today, and they've taken a short break. Okay, I want to go back to the beginning of this morning. So we were supposed to have retired Sergeant Daniel Coronado on the stand, and then the prosecution decided, maybe never mind. We're not going to do any more redirect. And then the defense was like, okay. And so what did you think about that decision and why they did that?
I think it was tied into how Coronado testified yesterday. I think that processed with the prosecutor, and he probably realized this didn't go the way I thought it was going to go. And it went very favorable for defense, and that's what we were talking about, before trial started up again today. And I think they realized if they put him back on today, it's not going to help the state. It's going just to help the defense even further. So I'm not shocked that they didn't, do any redirect today. I'm not shocked.
Yeah, they had the night to think about it, and they said, yeah, maybe not.
Right. So I think that was one smart thing they did, is just let that witness go.
Let that sleeping dog lie, basically. Yeah. Does this speak to not properly preparing your witness or not knowing what your witness is going to say? I just trying to understand, even going back to that.
So, typically, you talk to your witness and you meet with them at great length to prepare for trial. You have them watch, if it's an officer, for example, you have them watch their body cam, you have them watch their dash cam, and you ask them questions about that, and you get a feel for what they're going to say. But realistically, when you're putting on Officer Coronado as a prosecutor, I just don't know how they thought that he was going to come across favorable for the state to begin with. He responded. He was there with Adrian Gonzales. I just don't know how they thought he would be favorable for the state, and he wasn't. And he was so favorable to defense that they didn't even call him back today. And I just don't see how that even went with preparing him, how that could have helped the state at all.
Yeah, it's very much and throughout this trial, I have struggled to understand their strategy, their decision making. Why are we doing what they're doing? And so I thought, okay, good decision to just let that sleeping dog lie. But then now we're back to DPS troopers.
We are back to DPS troopers or
Rangers rather.
Right. And it's getting very technical today. Very technical. You have, testifying while going through a binder and checking back on timestamps and numbers. And it's just getting very technical. And I don't think it really needs to get that technical. Again, there's a lot of emotion that, is surrounding this trial. And I feel like that's kind of fizzling out as the trial's proceeding, at least while watching the trial. And with the two witnesses that we saw today, when they leave the stand, I'm like, what purpose did they serve? Why did they testify? What information did we really get from them? Was it helpful at all? I don't feel like it was.
Well, you pointed out that one of the commenters, and I wrote it down because that one of the commenters on YouTube said, after every witness, we are left to wonder why they were called.
Right. And that's the thing. If we're watching, wondering why they were called, I can only imagine there's a juror, or possibly maybe even all of them, wondering the same exact thing, because they're sitting in this right now. They are having to pay attention to everything. And when you're in the courtroom and you're tied into having to watch this trial and having to hear all of these facts and hear all the testimony, and you have to take all of this into consideration, you are asking, why am I hearing this testimony? What is the reason for this? And if you are left wondering why, it's just confusing. It's confusing as a juror. And it's just, I'm shocked. I really am. I just don't think that the last two witnesses really helped the prosecution at all.
Did these families deserve better?
Yes, they do. They've gone through so much. So much time has passed, from the shooting to now, and you think about it as, a mother. I have children, and I cannot imagine how these parents feel. But if I was watching this as a parent, I would be so angry. And, even just watching it now, and I'm a defense attorney, so, I play a different role than a prosecutor, but just watching this trial, I just don't understand the rationale, the reasoning for why it's being presented the way that it is. I just think it could have been done so different.
Yeah, and maybe you would still end up, you'd either end up with a conviction, maybe you'd still end up with an acquittal, but the families would be left thinking, we had our day in court.
Right, and that's really what it's about, right? Because there's these victims' families, and people do want their day in court, and in this day and age, it's televised. You get to watch it in real time, or these families are there. They can sit in that courtroom and watch it play out in real time. And as a prosecutor, I've dealt with trials where you have victims, and you just want to know that at the end of the day, I did everything I could for justice for this victim. And so, because it doesn't feel good to walk away from a trial just knowing you didn't give it your best, you didn't give it your all. And so I'm just really surprised that a trial of this caliber, that this is how it's going down.
Yeah, but I think I sensed on really day one when we had our first witness that goes south. Stephanie Hale is the teacher who on day one of the trial gets up and testifies, and I'm going to say it again, I've said it many times, memory's a funny thing. Our memories are not photographic, they are not like video cameras, and so she gets up and she testifies and she says, I saw, and some of her testimony is really compelling, talking about the children grabbing the safety scissors. That stuck in my head because the thought of little children grabbing safety scissors made my heart hurt. But the part that was a problem was she said, well, I saw the gunman on the south side of the school with the rifle. Well, she hadn't told that to the Rangers originally, but in December when she was re-interviewed, she had told the prosecutors about seeing the gunman with the rifle. They took notes, they didn't give them the defense, and so that ultimately led to her testimony being excluded. Mm-hmm. And that was when that went down, and then the prosecutor, the Uvalde District Attorney, was put under oath in the courtroom. That was when the light bulb went on in my head. I'm like, oh, maybe these prosecutors this is not going to go so well. Mm-hmm. Like they seem to not be bringing their A game. And maybe this is their A game. I don't know. I don't know these prosecutors. I don't know either one of them. I mean, I've watched prosecutors who can give a master class. For me, this has been a master class in how not to prosecute a case. Mm-hmm. And so that's been interesting. I do want to talk a little bit. There was the testimony this morning. There were some interesting things, though, that maybe not for convicting Adrian Gonzales, but they were interesting just for understanding the level of firepower. Right.
Right.
The shooter fires 173 rounds that they recovered, 4 at the crash site, 60 bullets in room 111, and we know that all 11 children in that room died. Mm-hmm. The teacher survived, and he testified. I think it was earlier this week, mm-hmm. and then I think so. My days are running together, and there were 56 rounds fired in room 112 and 27 in the hallway. That's just an enormous amount of gunfire.
Right, it's a lot.
Yeah, and so
mm-hmm.
and then we learned that there were 35 rounds fired by law enforcement, 27 in room 111. That will be from when they made entry. Mm-hmm. 7 in the hallway. I'm guessing that also is kind of part of the entry, and then 1 on the other side. The one that they said other, and they were making a point that none of those rounds were fired outside. And then the other thing they were talking about was that Adrian Gonzales arrives, and then 14 seconds after he arrives, he calls out shots fired, shots fired. And then they're saying that a minute and 4 seconds after he arrived, the gunman enters the building. And then they're making a point about when some of these shots were fired in room 111. Do you think that's having an impact? What do you think about that testimony?
I think I can see why the prosecution, I can kind of see why they're trying to pinpoint those time frames. But I'm really interested to see how this cross is going to go, because I hear 14 seconds, that's not a long time. I hear 1 minute, that's not a long time. And for Adrian Gonzales to arrive on the scene in within 14 seconds, then, yells out, shots are fired. Again, he didn't know what he was going into. When he arrived at the scene, he didn't know that there was a gunman shooting. He knew there was a man with a gun. He didn't know what the circumstances were.
And he doesn't have line of sight.
No.
He hears, and we heard his statement to the Texas Rangers, he hears gunfire, it's echoing, he's not sure where it's coming from. So you're expecting him in that minute and 4 seconds to ascertain where the gunfire's coming from, run over there. Now, one thing I don't know is how long so even if he could ascertain where the gunfire was coming from in time to prevent him from going in the school, let's assume he could have. How long would it take to run around to that side of the building?
Exactly.
And I don't know. I know he was assigned to the high school, and he had been at that school, is what my understanding. But how well he knew that building, I don't know.
Right.
So I don't know. How do you think the jury will view that?
I think at this point, I really just don't believe the state is making a good case, and that they're bringing out good points that's going to solidify this for the jury. I think a lot of the things that are coming out are really helpful for defense. We saw the body camera yesterday, and we got to see for ourselves what happened in that hallway. We got to see the response. Today, they're getting into all of these technical things that I'm not sure if the jury's going to follow along with that. We are not really following along with that. So that's just concerning. We heard a lot of testimony today about the investigation the day after, where they found the casings and, distance from one casing to another, and about just very technical things that I just don't think we needed to get into. I'm just concerned on how that's registering with the jury.
Yeah, because these are lay people. I mean, again, you and I are like courthouse denizens, right? So we're not the normal people. These are lay people,
right?
And I can't, if I'm sitting there going, why is that witness on the stand? I don't really understand. And I do kind of understand having someone get up and testify and talk about how many, the number of rounds. I get that. Actually, I'm surprised we haven't heard it sooner. Like, why are we today, on the day that they're expected to arrest, just now hearing this? And then you had all these, these rangers that testified earlier in the week. Many of them testified about ballistics. It seems like you could have, I don't know if compressed, but used, maybe decided, okay, we only really need these 3 rangers. We don't really need every Texas Ranger in the state to come testify as part of this trial.
They could have been more concise about it. Again, and like I said this morning, I just don't think they needed to bring all the witnesses that they brought. This trial did not have to, it doesn't really have to be this long if they just really went in with the high points of what mattered. Because right now, again, we're getting into technical things when I don't know if the jury's just, if they're going to follow along with that, and how they've been following along this far into the game. And even during the testimony that we just heard, you hear a lot of repeat questions, like just, again with how many seconds, like how many times do we need to hear that? Because it's not helping anything. And it's not, for me, a point where that's like a shocking response that you just kind of want them to repeat it again in case somebody in the jury wasn't listening. But no, it's not. It's just being repetitive to the point where, again, it's like, why is this witness here? What are we trying to get from this witness? But then it's repetitive testimony.